So I do have to ask.
Sure.
You had mentioned at one point that you don't think that there's a creator, and it doesn't
Right.
seem obvious to you that that would be the case.
So the problem of creation is absolutely fundamental, and it's an ancient idea. And so again, I'm not a philosopher. At best, I'm an amateur, but I've read a bit here and there over the decades, and so here's my distilling of it. So you go back to actually the pre-Socratics, okay? So Parmenides, this guy called Parmenides, basically said that nothing ever changes.
Yeah.
Everything is as it always was and
I think this
always
was
will be.
Zeno's philosophy as well.
Could be, but Parmenides came first. So I think, I could be wrong on that. So, so anyway, Parmenides says that nothing changes, and you can say, well, that's stupid. I mean, today's sunny, tomorrow's raining. That's a change. He says that's superficial and meaningless. Nothing at a fundamental level ever changes. Always like that, going an infinite way in the past. It'll always be the same, an infinite way in the future. Counter to that, so that's kind of a continuum that never changes. Counter that with Heraclitus, who basically said everything's changing all the time. He's the guy who famously said you can't step in the same stream twice
Right.
because the water
It's a
is no
different
longer,
stream
it's a
now.
different stream, it's
Yeah.
different water. Okay. So there, in other words, creation is continuous there. In one, there's no creation because it was always the same, always will be the same, no creation. The other one is continuous creation. The two are separate poles. So there is no way to, yin and yang, whatever you want to call it, there's no way to marry them. They're two totally different conceptions. So the reason I went into that tangent is when you ask me about creation, while I I don't believe there's a creator, however, there could be because I can't explain a universe that comes out of nothingness.
Hmm.
And I understand that the Big Bang, we can only go back to the Planck time, but that's a cop out.
Yeah.
Everybody's more interested in finding out what happened at time t equals zero or before. Okay. So let's say that to deal with that, you need a creator. I'm even willing to concede that because, again, the act of creation is irreconcilable with an infinite past and an infinite future. So you got to sort of stick it in there. So if you need to stick in a creator to make the universe quote unquote go, I'll grant that
So you can grant that as a matter of definition.
as a matter of as almost necessity more,
Right, right. I
okay.
think that is the argument that Parmenides, or that springs from Parmenides' like theory of nothing changing, is that, well, things change in the sense that they might be in, like, this water bottle might be in a different place as it was before, but it had to have the potential to do that, and then something had to move it,
Okay.
and you can go through an infinite
Sure.
regression and say, well, there had to be
As the
something.
prime mover, right?
Right,
Yeah,
right, the unmoved mover, but
right,
that's not a description of God. That's a definition.
right.
Something
And
to be
I'm
at the.
willing to grant that that might be, if you want to stick that in there in your logical system, I won't argue. But to go from that type of creator to one that cares whether I cheated on my wife or my income taxes,
Right.
and will doom me to an eternity of damnation, or nah, that's ridiculous. I don't believe that that's the way to go. It
See.
doesn't work for me. It makes no sense for me. Since we like a little bit of amateur philosophy, in that respect, I side with Bakunin, the famous Russian anarchist, who perhaps jokingly said that if God existed, we would have to abolish him because a God that would be so capricious, sort of toying with our lives in that matter, needs to be overthrown.
You see.
So in other words, I'll grant you the definition of a creator because I don't know how to make something out of nothing.
Sure, sure.
All right, but to go from that to a personal creator who's interested in what I do that makes no sense to me. Having said that, so that we don't offend anybody, and because I don't want to offend anybody, my
Sure.
mother raised me not to offend people.
Right.
Okay, so I would never ever argue my point of view with a believer
Mm.
for two reasons. One is, who am I to tell you what you should think? And secondly, life, I think, is hard enough for everybody, regardless of what you believe or you don't believe, that if you feel you need that to get through life, I don't want to take that away from you.
Yeah.
I have my own ways of making sense of, life and death. But I realized a long time ago, perhaps too late in life, but I realized a long time ago that my understanding of my role in the universe, even if I explain it to you, it might not help you. In other words, it's not only am I not going to be able to convert you, it might not even help you at all. It might make things worse, and I
Right.
certainly don't want to do
Right.
that.